The stars outside the window had always made Kang Jinho feel small, but tonight, as he sat in the captain's chair of the cargo ship Horizon's Edge, he felt something else. He felt watched. "Jinho, I am getting strange readings on the scanner," said Park Yuna from her seat at the engineering station. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the worry hiding underneath. He stood up and walked over to look at her screen. The green dots showed their ship moving through empty space, but there was something else now. A large red shape was appearing at the edge of the display. "That is not one of ours," said Choi Minyu, the oldest member of their crew. He had worked as a diplomat for 20 years before joining them. Now he crossed his arms and stared at the screen with knowing eyes. "That is an Orion warship." The bridge went quiet. Everyone had heard stories about the Orions. They were an ancient race that had been conquering other species for thousands of years. They believed they were the greatest beings in the universe. To them, every other species was nothing more than insects waiting to be stepped on. "How long before they reach us?" Jinho asked. Yuna typed quickly on her keyboard. 15 minutes, maybe less." "Can we outrun them?" "Their ship is 3 times faster than ours." Jinho nodded slowly. He looked around the bridge at his crew. There were 7 of them in total. Yuna, who could fix any machine with her eyes closed. Minyu, who always knew the right thing to say. And 4 others who had become family over the years of traveling through space together. "Everyone listen to me," Jinho said. His voice was steady. "We cannot fight them. We cannot run from them. So we are going to do something else. We are going to survive." "You want us to surrender?" asked a young crew member named Dohun. His hands were shaking. "I want us to live," Jinho replied. "Dead heroes cannot save anyone. We stay calm, we watch, we learn, and when the time is right, we find a way out." The minutes passed like hours. The Orion warship grew larger and larger on their screens until it filled the entire display. It was a massive thing, all sharp angles and dark metal. It looked like a weapon that had learned how to fly. Then their ship shook violently. The lights flickered and died. Emergency power came on, filling the bridge with dim red light. "They hit us with an EMP pulse," Yuna said. "Engines are dead, weapons are dead, we have nothing." A voice came through their communication system. It was cold and spoke their language perfectly, but with a strange accent that made every word sound like a threat. "Human vessel, you will prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in immediate death. You have 2 minutes." Jinho looked at his crew. Yuna's jaw was tight with anger. He knew she wanted to fight. He walked over to her and put a hand on her shoulder. "Not today," he said quietly. "Trust me." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. The Orion soldiers came through the airlock like water through a broken dam. There were at least 30 of them, all wearing black armor that covered their tall, thin bodies. Their skin was pale blue, and their eyes were large and completely black, like pools of dark water. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never lost a fight. The leader of the soldiers walked up to Jinho. He was taller than the others, and his armor had gold markings on it. "You are the captain?" he asked. "I am." "Your species is called human, correct? We have been hearing about your kind. A young race, weak, foolish enough to think you belong among the stars." Jinho said nothing. He simply looked at the soldier with calm eyes. This seemed to annoy the Orion. He leaned closer to Jinho. "Do you have nothing to say? No brave words, no threats?" "Would they change anything?" Jinho asked. The soldier laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "No, they would not take them." The Orion soldiers grabbed the crew and began pushing them toward the airlock. Their hands were bound with glowing restraints that felt cold against the skin. As they walked, Jinho kept his eyes open, watching everything. He noticed how the soldiers communicated with small hand signals. He noticed the way they held their weapons. He noticed everything. They were almost at the airlock when something happened. One of the Orion soldiers near the back made a frustrated sound. He was shaking his weapon and pressing buttons, but nothing was happening. Jinho stopped walking. The soldier behind him pushed him forward, but he spoke first. "The power cell is inserted backward," Jinho said. "You need to turn it around." Everyone stopped. The Orion soldier with the broken weapon stared at Jinho. The other soldiers stared at Jinho. Even his own crew stared at him with confusion in their eyes. "What did you say?" the lead soldier asked. "His weapon. The power cell is backward. I saw the same design on a trading station 2 years ago. The cells can be inserted either way, but they only work in one direction. He needs to open the bottom panel, remove the cell, and put it back in the other way." The soldier with the broken weapon looked at his leader. The leader nodded slowly. The soldier opened the panel, removed a small glowing cylinder, turned it around, and put it back. The weapon hummed to life. No one spoke for several seconds. "Why would you help him?" the lead soldier finally asked. There was genuine confusion in his voice. "He is your enemy. We are taking you prisoner. We may kill you." Jinho shrugged. "He was having trouble. I knew how to help. Why would I not help him?" The lead soldier studied Jinho for a long moment. His black eyes revealed nothing, but Jinho could sense something changing in the air. This was not the reaction the Orion had expected. "Move them to the transport," the soldier finally ordered, but his voice was quieter now, less certain. As they were loaded onto the Orion ship, Yuna managed to get close to Jinho. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "Because they expect us to be afraid and angry," Jinho whispered back. "They expect us to act like animals in a trap. Every time we act differently, we become harder to understand. And enemies you do not understand are enemies you must think about carefully." Minyu, who was walking behind them, allowed himself a small smile. He had seen many diplomatic games in his life, but this was perhaps the most interesting one he had ever witnessed. The Orion transport ship was cold and dark. The prisoners were placed in a holding cell with hard metal walls and a single dim light in the ceiling. Through a small window, Jinho could see stars moving past. They were traveling fast, heading somewhere far away. "Where do you think they are taking us?" Dohun asked. He was the youngest of them, barely 22 years old. "Probably their homeworld," Minyu said. "The Orions like to show off their conquests. We will be paraded in front of their leaders like trophies." "Then what?" Yuna asked. No one answered. They all knew the stories. The Orions had conquered more than 300 species. None of those species were free anymore. Some had been completely destroyed. Others had been turned into servants, their cultures erased, their histories forgotten. But Jinho was not thinking about the past. He was thinking about the future. "Get some rest," he told his crew. "Save your strength. This is only the beginning." The others slowly settled onto the cold floor, trying to find comfortable positions. But Jinho stayed at the window, watching the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home, his people. He did not know if he would ever see it again, but he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to give up, not today, not ever. That was the human way. The journey to the Orion homeworld took 3 days. 3 days of cold metal walls, strange food that tasted like nothing, and the constant hum of engines. But finally, the ship began to slow down, and Jinho knew they had arrived. When the doors opened, bright light flooded into the cell. Jinho raised his hand to shield his eyes. As they adjusted, he saw something that took his breath away. Oria Prime was beautiful. The city stretched out before them like a dream made real. Massive towers of white and silver reached up toward a pale purple sky. Floating vehicles moved between the buildings like schools of fish in an ocean of air. Gardens hung from every surface, filled with plants that glowed in soft colors. Everything was clean and perfect and impossibly old. "Do not stand there with your mouths open," said an Orion guard, pushing them forward. "You look even more pathetic than usual." The prisoners were led down a long ramp and onto a wide street, and that was when Jinho realized they were not alone. Thousands of Orions lined both sides of the street. They had come to watch. The crowd looked at the humans with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. Some laughed. Others made sounds that might have been insults. Children pointed and tugged at their parents' arms. It was like being animals in a parade. "Keep your heads up," Jinho said quietly to his crew. "Do not look at the ground, do not show them fear." "I am not afraid," Yuna said through tight lips. "I am angry." "Good, but hide it. Anger they can use against us. Let them think we are calm and unbroken." The walk through the city seemed to take forever. Every step brought new wonders and new insults. Jinho tried to focus on studying everything he saw. The technology here was far beyond anything humans had created. These people had been building cities when humans were still living in caves. And yet something bothered him. The Orions all looked the same. They moved the same. They dressed the same. There was no variety, no chaos, no difference between one face and another. It was like an entire city of copies. Minyu walked beside him, observing the same things. "Empires that value order above all else always have cracks," the old diplomat whispered. "They just hide them well." Finally, they reached the palace. It was the largest building Jinho had ever seen. It rose from the center of the city like a mountain made of crystal, catching the light and throwing it in all directions. Guards in golden armor stood at every entrance. Flags with strange symbols hung from the walls. Inside, the palace was even more impressive. The floors were made of something that looked like glass but felt warm under their feet. Statues of past rulers lined the hallways, each one taller and more grand than the last. The air smelled sweet, like flowers Jinho had never known. They were brought to a pair of massive doors. The lead guard spoke to someone through a communication device. A moment later, the doors began to open by themselves, slowly revealing the throne room beyond. Jinho had seen many things in his life as a space traveler, but this room made him feel truly small. The ceiling was so high that clouds actually floated near the top, soft white shapes drifting in the light that came from somewhere he could not see. The walls were covered in images that seemed to move, showing scenes of conquest and victory from throughout Orion history. And at the far end of the room, sitting on a throne made of something that looked like frozen light, was Queen Vila. She was tall, even for an Orion. Her skin was darker blue than the others, and her black eyes seemed even deeper, like looking into space itself. She wore a dress that flowed around her like liquid silver, and on her head was a crown of sharp crystal points. Everything about her spoke of power and age, and the certainty that she had never been wrong about anything in her long life. Around the throne stood dozens of advisors and guards. Among them, Jinho noticed the female commander who had escorted them from their ship. Her name, he had learned, was Rin. "Bring them forward," the queen said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the entire room. The guards pushed the prisoners until they stood at the base of the throne. Jinho found himself looking up at the most powerful being in the known galaxy. "So these are humans," the queen said, studying them the way a scientist might study insects. "They are even smaller than I expected." The advisors around her laughed. The queen did not. "Commander Rin," she continued, "tell me about these creatures. What are they?" Rin stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, humans come from a small planet called Earth in the outer spiral of the galaxy. They are a young species. They have only had space travel for about 200 years. They have spread to 12 worlds, but their technology is primitive compared to ours. And yet they have caused us some trouble near the border," the queen said. "Some of our ships have been damaged by human resistance fighters." "Small incidents, Your Majesty. Nothing that threatens the Empire. Still, they interest me." The queen rose from her throne and descended the steps until she stood directly in front of Jinho. He had to look up to meet her eyes. "You are their captain, yes?" "I am." Tell me, Captain, are all humans so small and fragile, or are you a particularly weak example? Jinho kept his voice calm. We are all about this size, Your Majesty. We are aware that we are not the largest or strongest species in the galaxy. At least you are honest about your weakness. The Queen walked slowly around him, examining him from all angles. Your bodies are soft. Your bones break easily. You live for such a short time, and yet you keep spreading through space like a disease. Why? Because that is what we do, Jinho said. We explore, we grow, we adapt. You will need to adapt to being conquered. The Queen returned to her throne and sat down. She looked at the group of prisoners with cold eyes. Your planet Earth will be the next world to fall to the Orion Empire. Within 1 year, your species will belong to us. Those who serve well may be allowed to continue existing. Those who resist will be destroyed. The room was silent. Jinho could feel his crew looking at him, waiting to see how he would respond. He could see Yuna's hands curling into fists behind her back. Before you decide how we will spend our future, Jinho said, may I ask a question, Your Majesty? The Queen raised one eyebrow. Prisoners did not usually ask questions, but she seemed more amused than angry. You may ask. How many species have you conquered? The Queen smiled. It was not a warm expression. 314. Each one thought they were special. Each one thought they could resist. Each one was wrong. Jinho nodded slowly, as if considering this information carefully. That is very impressive. The Queen waited for him to say more, but he did not. He simply stood there, his face thoughtful and calm. Is that all? She asked. No begging for mercy, no declarations of defiance. Would either change anything, Your Majesty? The Queen studied him for a long moment. Around her, the advisors whispered to each other. This was not how prisoners behaved. They should be crying or screaming or making foolish threats. This quiet acceptance was strange. You are an interesting creature, the Queen finally said. Commander Rin, I want these humans separated and questioned individually. I want to understand how their minds work before I destroy their world. Rin bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. As the guards began to lead them away, Jinho caught the commander's eye. For just a moment, he saw something there that surprised him. It was not hatred or contempt. It was curiosity. The prisoners were taken to separate cells in a building near the palace. As they were being divided up, Yuna managed to grab Jinho's arm. What are you doing? She whispered urgently. Why are you being so calm? We should be fighting. We are fighting, Jinho said, just not with our fists. Every time we act in a way they do not expect, we plant a seed of doubt in their minds. They have conquered 300 species. They think they know everything about how people behave, but they do not know us. Not yet. Yuna shook her head. I do not understand. You will, Jinho said, and then the guards pulled them apart. Alone in his cell, Jinho sat on the hard bench and looked at the blank walls around him. Somewhere out there, his home was being targeted for invasion. His people had no idea what was coming, and he was trapped here, powerless to warn them. But he was not hopeless. He had seen the look in Commander Rin's eyes. He had seen the Queen's interest, and he knew something that the Orions did not understand. Humans were not like the other species they had conquered. Humans did not give up. The interrogations began the next morning. One by one, the human prisoners were taken from their cells and brought to special rooms where Orion officials waited to question them. The Orions wanted to know everything about humanity. They wanted to know about human weapons, human cities, human governments. They wanted to find every weakness they could use. But what they found instead was something that confused them deeply. Park Yuna was the first to be questioned. They brought her to a white room with a single table and 2 chairs. An Orion official sat across from her, his black eyes studying her face. He had a device in front of him that recorded everything. You are the engineer of the ship, he said. You understand human technology. I understand some of it, Yuna replied. Tell me about your ships. How fast can they travel? What weapons do they carry? Yuna leaned back in her chair. Our ships are slower than yours. Our weapons are weaker than yours. Is this the information you wanted? The official frowned. You admit your technology is inferior. It is the truth. Why would I lie about it? Most prisoners try to make their species sound stronger than they are. That would be foolish, Yuna said. You would discover the truth eventually. What would be the point? The official made some notes. Then he asked, if your technology is so weak, how did your species manage to spread to 12 worlds in only 200 years? Yuna thought about this question. Because we work hard. When something breaks, we fix it. When we face a problem, we find a solution. We do not wait for perfect tools. We use what we have. The Orion Empire has been traveling through space for 12,000 years, the official said. In that time, we have perfected everything. Every ship, every weapon, every system. Perfection takes time. Yuna shrugged. Maybe, but we reached 12 worlds in 200 years. You just said it took you much longer than that. The official's eyes narrowed. He did not like this comparison. Quantity is not the same as quality. True, Yuna agreed. But sometimes being fast matters more than being perfect. The official ended the session shortly after that. He seemed disturbed by something, though Yuna was not sure what. In a different room, Choi Minyu faced his own interrogator. This one was older, with lines on his blue face that suggested centuries of life. He seemed more patient than the others. You were a diplomat, the old Orion said. You negotiated between different human nations. I did, Minyu confirmed. This confuses us. The reports say that humans have no single ruler. You have many different governments that often disagree with each other. How do you function as a species without unity? Minyu smiled gently. That is a good question. The answer is complicated. Our different governments do disagree. Sometimes we even fight each other. But when something threatens all of humanity, we come together. Our diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. How can division be strength? Because when you only have one way of thinking, you only have one way of solving problems. When you have many different cultures and ideas, you have many different solutions. If one approach fails, another might succeed. The old Orion considered this. The Orion Empire has survived for thousands of years because we are united under one ruler, one law, one vision. Every citizen knows their place and their purpose. And what happens when that one vision is wrong? Minyu asked. What happens when the ruler makes a mistake? Who corrects them? The ruler does not make mistakes. Minyu nodded politely. I see. Then you have never needed to change or adapt. We have reached perfection. There is nothing to change. I wonder, Minyu said softly, if a perfect thing can ever grow, or if it can only stay the same until it breaks. The old Orion did not respond to this. He sat in silence for a long moment, then ended the interrogation. As Minyu was led back to his cell, he noticed that the old Orion remained seated, staring at nothing. But the most important interrogation was happening in Commander Rin's personal office. She had requested to question Captain Jinho herself, and the Queen had allowed it. Rin sat behind a desk covered in reports and star maps. Jinho sat across from her, his hands still bound in the glowing restraints, but there were no guards in the room. It was just the two of them. I have been reading about your species, Rin began. Your history is very violent. You have fought countless wars against each other. You have created weapons capable of destroying your own planet. You have even used these weapons on each other. This is true, Jinho admitted. And yet you survive. You continue to grow. How? Because we also create peace. After every war we try to do better. We fail sometimes, but we keep trying. Rin leaned forward. The incident on your ship troubles me. When the soldier's weapon malfunctioned, you helped him fix it. Why? I have already answered this question. No, you gave me a response, but it was not truly an answer. I want to understand. Rin's black eyes were intense. That soldier might have used that weapon to kill you, to kill your friends, and you helped him anyway. In 400 years of military service, I have never seen anything like it. Jinho was quiet for a moment. He could see that Rin genuinely wanted to understand. This was not a trick or a test. She was confused and she needed an explanation. On Earth, he said slowly, there is a word called compassion. It means feeling the suffering of others and wanting to help them, even when they are not your friends, even when they are your enemies. Why would you feel suffering for an enemy? Because an enemy is still a person. They have fears and hopes and dreams just like you do. When I saw that soldier struggling with his weapon, I did not see an enemy. I saw someone having trouble. I knew how to help, so I helped. Rin shook her head. This makes no sense. In war, you destroy your enemies. You do not help them. In war, yes, but I was not in war. I was a prisoner. The fighting was already over. What harm could it do to help someone? It helps your enemy become stronger. Does it? Jinho asked. Or does it make your enemy question whether you are really his enemy at all? Rin stared at him. He could see thoughts moving behind her eyes, ideas colliding with beliefs she had held for centuries. You are a very strange creature, she finally said. We are all strange to someone, Jinho replied. But strange is not the same as wrong. Rin ended the interrogation shortly after that, but she did not send Jinho back to his cell immediately. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at the city. The Queen will want to know what I have learned, she said, not looking at him. She will ask if humans are dangerous. What will you tell her? Rin was silent for a long moment. Then she said, I will tell her that humans are more complex than we anticipated, that we should study you further before any invasion begins. Jinho felt a small spark of hope. That is very wise, Commander. It is not wisdom, Rin said. It is caution. You have confused me, Captain, and I do not like being confused. Back in the detention building, Yuna was sitting in her cell when she noticed something. The light panel in the ceiling was flickering. On and off, on and off. Most prisoners would ignore such a thing, but Yuna was an engineer. She could not ignore anything broken. She stood on her bench and examined the panel. The flickering was caused by a loose connection in the power supply. She could see where the wire had come undone. If she could reach it, she could fix it. There was a small piece of metal on the floor, probably from a previous prisoner's restraints. She picked it up and used it to open the panel. Then, working carefully with her fingers, she reconnected the wire. The light stopped flickering. It shone bright and steady. A guard passed by her cell and stopped. He stared at the light, then at Yuna, then at the light again. What did you do? He demanded. I fixed it, Yuna said simply. It was bothering me. The guard looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked away without another word. But Yuna saw him speaking urgently into his communication device. She had done something they did not expect again. That night, reports from all the interrogations were collected and sent to Queen Vila. She read them in her private chambers, her black eyes moving across each page. The reports troubled her. These humans were not like the other species the Orions had conquered. They did not beg or threaten or pretend to be stronger than they were. They admitted their weaknesses openly. They asked questions that had no easy answers. They helped their enemies. They fixed things without being asked. And they refused to be afraid. Queen Vila set down the reports and walked to her window. She had ruled for 600 years. She had watched 300 species fall before her empire. She had never once questioned the Orion way. But tonight, for the first time in a very long time, she felt something she did not recognize. She felt uncertain. She needed to speak with the human captain herself, not in the throne room surrounded by advisors and guards, but somewhere quiet, somewhere private. She needed to understand what made these humans so different. And if she could not understand them, she needed to know if they truly were as harmless as they seemed, or if they were the most dangerous species the Orions had ever encountered. The guards came for Jinho in the middle of the night. He was not sleeping. He had learned long ago that sleep never came easily when the future was uncertain. So he was awake when the door opened and two soldiers in golden armor stepped inside. "The Queen wishes to speak with you," one of them said. "Alone." Jinho stood up slowly. "Lead the way." They walked through quiet hallways lit by soft lights that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The palace at night was different from the palace during the day. It was peaceful, almost beautiful. Jinho found himself looking at the art on the walls, the strange plants growing in glass containers, the stars visible through the high windows. Finally, they reached a door that was smaller than the others. The guards stopped. "Inside," one of them said, "the Queen is waiting." Jinho stepped through the door and found himself in a room unlike any he had expected. It was not a throne room or an interrogation chamber. It was a private study. Shelves lined the walls, filled with objects from different worlds. There were books and crystals and strange machines. In one corner, a small fountain made soft sounds as water flowed over stones. And there, sitting at a simple desk, was Queen Vila. She looked different without her crown and formal robes. She wore simpler clothes now, and her face seemed less like a mask and more like a real person. But her eyes were still deep and dark and impossible to read. "Sit," she said, pointing to a chair across from her. Jinho sat. He noticed that there were no guards in the room, no advisors, no weapons pointed at him. It was just the two of them, surrounded by silence. "Do you know why I brought you here?" the Queen asked. "I assume you want to ask me something." "I want to understand something." The Queen stood and walked slowly around the room. "I have ruled the Orion Empire for 600 years. Before me, my mother ruled for 1,000 years. Before her, her mother. We have built the greatest civilization in the galaxy. We have conquered every species that stood against us. We have never been defeated." She stopped at a shelf and picked up a small object. It looked like a crystal flower, frozen in time. "This is from a world called Thenar. The Thenar people were warriors, strong and proud. When we came to their world, they fought us with everything they had. They refused to surrender for 70 years, and in the end we destroyed them completely. Not a single Thenar exists today." She put the flower back and picked up another object, a piece of cloth with strange writing. "This is from Kalash 4. The Kalash were scientists. They tried to reason with us to negotiate. They believed that intelligent beings could find peaceful solutions. We conquered them in 3 weeks. They were too gentle to fight." She turned to face Jinho. 314 species. Some fought, some surrendered, some begged for mercy, some tried to hide. It did not matter. In the end, they all submitted. They all accepted that the Orion Empire was their master. She walked closer to him, her eyes locked on his face. "But your species is different. You do not fight with all your strength. You do not surrender completely. You do not beg for mercy. You do not hide. You help your enemies fix their weapons. You fix our broken lights without being asked. You ask questions about our empire as if you are studying us instead of fearing us." She sat down across from him again. "So I brought you here to ask you one question, Captain. One simple question. And I want you to answer me honestly." Jinho met her gaze. "Ask." "Every species we have conquered eventually submitted. They accepted that we were superior. They accepted that resistance was pointless. They gave up hope." The Queen leaned forward. "Why have you not given up? Why does your species continue to defy us when you know you cannot win?" The room was silent. Jinho could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was not just a question about himself. This was a question about all of humanity, about who they were, about what they believed. He thought about Earth, about his family, about the billions of people living their lives, loving each other, building things, making mistakes, trying again. He thought about all the wars humans had fought against each other, and all the times they had found peace afterward. He thought about the darkest moments in human history and the heroes who had refused to accept darkness as the final answer. And then he spoke. Your Majesty, you have conquered 300 species by teaching them to fear you. Your empire is built on fear. When people fear you, they submit. When they submit, you control them. It is a system that has worked for thousands of years. The Queen nodded. Yes, fear is the greatest tool of empire. But fear only works, Jinho continued, when people believe that submission will save them. When people believe that if they just give up, the pain will stop. When people believe that fighting is pointless because they will lose anyway. He paused, then he said the words that would change everything. Humans do not think that way. We do not fight because we think we will win. We fight because surrender is unthinkable. You can burn our cities. You can kill our people. You can take everything we have. And the last human standing will still look you in the eye and say no. The Queen stared at him. That is not courage, that is stupidity. Maybe, but it is also hope. Jinho's voice grew stronger. You see, Your Majesty, humans have faced extinction before. We have faced plagues that killed half our population. We have faced wars that nearly destroyed our world. We have faced disasters that seemed impossible to survive. And every single time we survived. Not because we were the strongest, not because we were the smartest, but because we refused to give up. He leaned forward, meeting her ancient eyes with his own young ones. Hope is the one thing your empire has never understood. It is not about believing that you will win. It is about believing that the future can be better than the present. It is about refusing to accept that the darkness is permanent. It is about lighting a candle even when you are surrounded by night. The Queen was silent. Her face had changed. The cold certainty that usually lived in her eyes was gone. In its place was something Jinho had never expected to see. Confusion and maybe something else, maybe even fear. You think your hope can defeat our empire? She finally asked. I think hope cannot be defeated, Jinho replied. You can kill every human in the galaxy and hope will still exist, because hope is not something you can touch or destroy. It lives in the heart, and as long as a single heart is beating, hope is still alive. The Queen rose from her chair and walked to the window. She stood there for a long time, looking out at the stars. Jinho could see her reflection in the glass. Her face was troubled in a way he had never seen before. I am offering you a choice, she said without turning around. Help us understand human weaknesses. Tell us how to break your people quickly and painlessly. In return, your crew will be spared. They will live out their lives as servants, but they will live. Earth will still fall, but your friends will survive. It was a test. Jinho knew it immediately. She wanted to see if his words were real or just speeches. She wanted to see if he would break when given the chance. Your Majesty, he said, standing up from his chair, I meant every word I said. My people's freedom is not something I can trade away, even to save my friends. Because if I made that choice, I would no longer be human. I would be something else, something smaller. The Queen turned to face him. Her eyes were wide. You would let your friends die for an idea. I would trust my friends to make the same choice I am making, because that is who we are. We are not just individuals trying to survive. We are a people trying to build something better. And sometimes, building something better requires sacrifice. The Queen stared at him for what felt like hours. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. The only sound was the soft bubbling of the fountain in the corner. Then something remarkable happened. The Queen laughed. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh. It was a surprised laugh, like a child discovering something wonderful for the first time. It was the laugh of someone whose entire understanding of the universe had just been turned upside down. In 600 years, she said, still smiling, No one has ever spoken to me the way you have. No one has ever refused me when I offered them life. No one has ever made me question whether conquest is truly victory." She walked over to him and looked down at his face. He was so small compared to her, so fragile, so temporary, and yet he stood there without fear, without doubt, without any sign of weakness. "I do not know what to do with you, Captain," she admitted. "You have given me much to think about." She called for the guards. When they entered, she gave them an order that surprised everyone. "Take him back to his cell, but give him better quarters. He is no longer a prisoner, he is a guest." Jinho was led away in silence, but as he walked through the quiet hallways of the palace, he allowed himself a small smile. He had not won, not yet, but something had changed tonight. A seed had been planted in the mind of the most powerful being in the galaxy. And seeds, given enough time, could grow into anything. 1 week passed, then 2, then a month. The invasion of Earth did not happen. No Orion ships moved toward human space. No orders were given to attack. The human prisoners remained on Auria Prime, but they were no longer treated like animals. They had rooms instead of cells. They ate real food. They were allowed to walk in certain gardens. And slowly, something began to change across the Empire. Commander Rin had been there that night. She had been watching through a hidden screen when Jinho spoke to the Queen. She had heard every word, and those words had stayed with her, burning in her mind like fire. She had served the Empire for 400 years. She had conquered dozens of worlds herself. She had watched species bow before Orion power, accepting defeat because they believed they had no choice. She had always believed this was the natural order of things. The strong ruled, the weak served. That was the way of the universe. But now she was not so sure. She began talking to other officers, quietly at first. She shared what she had witnessed. She told them about the human captain who had helped an enemy fix his weapon. She told them about the engineer who fixed a broken light because it bothered her. She told them about the words Jinho had spoken to the Queen. Most officers dismissed her at first. These were just stories. Humans were just another weak species, nothing to worry about. But some officers listened, and some of them began to think. In the prisons across the Empire, word began to spread. The conquered species who had been slaves for generations heard whispers about the humans who refused to break. The people who had long ago given up hope began to feel something stirring in their hearts, something they had forgotten. Maybe, they thought, maybe surrender is not the only way. Meanwhile, Queen Vila was experiencing something she had not felt in centuries: uncertainty. Every night she read the reports about human history. She learned about their wars, yes, but she also learned about their art, their music, their stories. She learned about the way they loved each other, the way they sacrificed for each other, the way they forgave each other after terrible mistakes. She read about a human named Gandhi, who fought an empire without weapons. She read about a woman named Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat on a bus and changed her entire nation. She read about scientists who cured diseases and artists who created beauty from nothing and ordinary people who became heroes simply by refusing to look away from suffering. These were not the actions of a weak species. These were the actions of a species that understood something the Orions had forgotten. That true strength was not about power, it was about purpose. One morning the Queen did something unprecedented. She invited Jinho to walk with her in her private garden. No guards, no advisors, just the two of them, surrounded by flowers from 100 different worlds. "I have been studying your species," she said as they walked along a path lined with glowing plants. "You are full of contradictions." "We are," Jinho agreed. "You wage terrible wars against each other, and then you forgive your enemies and build new friendships. You destroy the environment of your planet, and then you fight to protect it. You create weapons of mass destruction, and then you create art of incredible beauty." "That is what it means to be human," Jinho said. We are always changing, always learning, always making mistakes and trying to do better. The queen stopped at a fountain, where crystal water fell into a pool of liquid light. I have ruled for 600 years, she said. I have not changed in all that time. I have not learned anything new. I have not made mistakes because I have not tried anything different. I thought this was strength, but now I wonder if it is just stagnation. Jinho looked at her. In this soft garden light she looked almost tired, almost lonely. Your Majesty, he said gently, it is never too late to change. If I change, my empire may fall apart. Our entire system is built on the belief that the Orions are perfect and unchanging. If I admit that we can be wrong, that we can learn from others, that we can grow, everything we have built could collapse. Or it could become something better, Jinho said. Something that lasts not because people fear it, but because people believe in it. The queen was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the question that had been burning in her heart since that night in her study. If I let your people go, if I spare Earth, your species will grow. In 1,000 years, you could become powerful enough to challenge us. You could become the next great empire. How do I know you would not do to us what we have done to others? Jinho thought carefully before answering. You do not know, he admitted. The future is never certain. Humans could become conquerors. We have that darkness in us just like every species, but we also have light. We have the ability to choose who we want to be. And right now, standing here in this garden, I am choosing to believe that we could be allies instead of enemies, that we could learn from each other instead of destroying each other. You would trust us after everything. Jinho smiled. Humans are really good at forgiving, Your Majesty. It is one of our better qualities. The queen looked at him with an expression he had never seen on an Orion face before. It was wonder. You are the strangest creature I have ever met, she said. I will take that as a compliment. And then something remarkable happened. Queen Vila laughed, a real laugh, full of genuine surprise and perhaps even joy. It was the sound of someone discovering that the universe was bigger and more interesting than she had ever imagined. She did not release the prisoners immediately. She could not appear weak in front of her people, but she announced that the invasion of Earth would be delayed for further study. Diplomatic channels were opened. Human representatives were invited to visit Auria Prime. Orion observers were sent to human space. It was not peace, not yet, but it was a beginning. Months passed. Jinho and his crew remained on Auria Prime as diplomatic guests. They were treated with respect. They were allowed to communicate with Earth. They became, in a strange way, ambassadors for their entire species. Yuna continued to fix things. Wherever she went in the palace, she found problems and solved them. The Orions who watched her began to understand something about humans. They did not just accept the world as it was. They tried to make it better. Minyu spent his days talking with Orion scholars and historians. He shared human philosophy and listened to Orion wisdom. He found that despite their differences, there were more similarities than either species had expected. Both had dreams. Both had fears. Both wanted to build something that would last. And Jinho spent many hours in conversation with the Queen and Commander Rin. Slowly, carefully, they built something that had never existed before, understanding between two species. On the last day before the crew was finally allowed to return home, Jinho and Yuna stood at a window in the palace, looking out at the alien city that had become strangely familiar. Do you think this will last? Yuna asked. Do you think they really can change? Jinho watched an Orion child playing in a garden below. The child was chasing some kind of small animal, laughing with pure joy. It reminded him of children on Earth. I do not know, he admitted. Change is hard. Old habits are strong. There will be people on both sides who want to return to the old ways. Then what was the point of all this? Jinho turned to look at her. The point is that we tried. The point is that we showed them something they had never seen before. We showed them that there is another way to be strong. Maybe it will not work. Maybe in 100 years our species will be at war. But maybe not. Maybe in 100 years, human and Orion children will play together in gardens like this one. We cannot know which future will happen. All we can do is try to build the one we want. Yuna was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. That is very human of you, she said. I will take that as a compliment. They returned to Earth as heroes. Their story spread across human space, inspiring millions. The crew of the Horizon's Edge became symbols of what humanity could be at its best, brave, compassionate, and unbreakable. But Jinho never forgot what the Queen had told him on their last meeting. You have given me something I lost long ago, she had said. You have given me doubt, and doubt is the beginning of wisdom. As the years passed, the relationship between humans and Orions slowly improved. There were setbacks and conflicts and moments when war seemed inevitable. But every time the darkness threatened to win, someone would remember the story of the human captain who refused to surrender and the alien queen who chose to listen. And they would choose hope. Because that was the lesson Jinho had taught the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The lesson that humans had learned through thousands of years of struggle and survival. That hope is not about believing you will win. Hope is about believing that the future can be better than the past. It is about lighting a candle in the darkness. It is about refusing to give up, no matter how impossible things seem. And hope, in the end, is something that no empire can ever truly defeat. On a quiet evening many years later, an old man sat in a garden on Earth, watching the stars. Kang Jinho was no longer a ship captain. His traveling days were over, but sometimes, when the night was clear, he would look up at the sky and wonder. Somewhere out there, in a palace made of light, an ancient queen was also looking at the stars. And both of them were thinking about the same thing. The future, and all the possibilities it held.